Hey everyone! Welcome back to Story Hive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let's jump into today's story. My husband of 30 years got angry over a past cheating mistake I regret, and it ruined our family. I'm facing a significant struggle and could use some advice and support from others. I'm a 49-year-old woman, and for this conversation, you can call me Jan. My husband, who is 50, will be Jerry. These names aren't our real ones, and I plan to delete this account after posting to protect our privacy. Jerry and I have enjoyed a happy marriage for 27 years and have two wonderful children, a 26-year-old son and a 24-year-old daughter. He was my first love and remains the only man I've ever truly loved. We've been a couple for over 30 years, having started dating when I was 18. I fell head over heels in love with Jerry, and he proposed to me just 7 months into our relationship. I eagerly accepted and was ready to marry him right then and there. At that time, he was in his second year of college, and I was working at a local hardware store franchise in our hometown. Our plan was to remain engaged until he graduated and secured a job before tying the knot. I was perfectly fine with this, even though it meant waiting nearly 3 years to get married, because my love for Jerry was so deep and I was excited about spending the rest of my life with him. The college he attended was located in the capital city of our state, a little over 2 hours from our hometown. Normally, he would come home nearly every weekend to be with me. However, there were occasional weekends when he stayed at school to study or due to bad weather. On those weekends, we'd spend hours on the phone talking multiple times a day. Keep in mind, this happened about 30 years ago, so there were no smartphones, texting, or internet. We relied on good old-fashioned landline phones. It's funny I feel so old reminiscing about this. Around a year into our engagement, I started feeling impatient and suggested we get married sooner instead of waiting another 2 years until he graduated. I explained how much I wanted to become his wife, expressing my concerns that he might meet someone else at school and leave me, which was probably just me projecting my fears. Jerry reassured me that he would never do such a thing and professed his love. He pointed out that it would allow us to make sure we were truly compatible and financially ready to start a family. Now, here's where I made a big mistake. There was this guy, let's call him Jim, who was an electrician and a regular customer at the hardware store, coming in for supplies 2 to 3 times a week. We had a friendly rapport and exchanged pleasantries during his visits. Over time, he began flirting with me and making advances. I told him I was sorry, but I was engaged. Jim responded by saying he was engaged too, but felt such a strong connection that he would be willing to take a risk for one chance. This back and forth flirting continued for weeks. Then one weekend, when Jerry unexpectedly informed me that he'd have to stay at school for the next 2 weekends, I made the regrettable decision to go out with Jim. We went on a couple of dates, and after our third date, things escalated, and I ended up in his bed. We met at Jim's apartment 3 more times over the next 2 weeks while his fiancée was at work. I know what you're probably thinking about me right now, and I have to agree with you. I believe I temporarily lost my sense of judgment. However, as soon as Jerry returned home, I came back to my senses and immediately ended things with Jim. Jim was devastated and tearfully pleaded with me to elope and run away with him. Breaking his heart was something I hated doing, but I remained firm and told him that we needed to erase this from our lives. I made it clear that we were both engaged and that Jerry was the love of my life. Jim and I went our separate ways. He stopped coming to the store, and I haven't spoken to him in 29 years. 2 months later, he married his fiancée, let's call her Susie, and 18 months later, I married Jerry. Since that time, we've had a happy marriage, and I genuinely mean that. We had a traditional marriage with Jerry as the provider, protector, and an excellent father, while I took care of the family, managed the household, and was a devoted stay-at-home mom. We loved our lives and had what most would consider an ideal marriage. However, all of this was shattered 3 days ago due to my carelessness. Now, here's the backstory throughout my teenage years and right up until a year before I married Jerry. I kept a detailed diary. When I moved out of my parents' house, I stored the diary in a cardboard box along with my yearbooks and other school mementos. We placed this box and similar ones filled with school memories in the basement of our new home. Those boxes remained in the same spot in our basement for more than 25 years without anyone touching them. Honestly, I completely forgot about the contents of those boxes, including the fact that my diary was in one of them. Then, this past Saturday, Jerry decided it was time to tidy up the basement and transfer everything from those boxes into plastic storage bins. He spent the entire morning cleaning down in the basement. When he finally came upstairs, he didn't say a word and headed down the hallway. I assumed he was just tired and was going to take a shower. He went into the bathroom and stayed there for a good 45 minutes. I checked on him and he told me he was fine, just reading. Little did I know what he was actually reading was my diary, which he found in one of the boxes. After he emerged from the bathroom, he walked right up to me holding the diary and said, "Look what I found." His face was filled with disgust and anger like I had never seen before. He then opened the diary and began reading the pages where I had written about Jim. I immediately asked him to stop and assured him I could explain, but he continued to read. I started crying and begged him to please stop. When he finished reading, I attempted to speak, but he interrupted me, saying, "Go pack a bag." I asked him why, and he replied, "For now you're going to your parents." I didn't want to upset him further, so I went ahead and started packing. After I finished packing, I attempted to talk to him, but he simply said, "Leave." I pleaded with him, even going down on my knees, hugging his legs and begging, but he continued to insist, "Leave." By this point his face had turned red and veins were bulging from his forehead. I had never witnessed him so furious. He has always been a composed and level-headed person. I left the house and drove to my parents' place. Once there, I explained what had transpired to them. They were taken aback and disappointed. My parents, both 81 years old, hold Jerry in high regard, considering him like a son. I clarified that what had occurred happened over 29 years ago, and that I had remained faithful throughout our marriage. They were deeply upset, and the shock left them unable to speak. I made numerous calls and sent texts to Jerry throughout the night, but he never responded. The following morning, I received a call from my daughter. She mentioned that her father had a video call with her and her brother the previous night, during which he sent them a file containing the crucial pages from my diary. I felt embarrassed and tried to explain the situation to my daughter, but she wasn't receptive and hung up. I then attempted to reach our son, but he didn't answer my calls and disregarded my texts and voicemails. I also made numerous attempts to contact Jerry, but he remained unresponsive. I went back to our house and stayed there the entire afternoon, but he never returned. Eventually, I went back to my parents' house. A little after 4:00 p.m., I received a call from Jim's wife, Susie. Susie began using profanity, hurling terrible insults at me, and warned me to steer clear of her if I knew what was best for me. I attempted to engage in a conversation with her, but she too abruptly ended the call. Later that night a good friend of mine called and informed me that Jerry was at a popular local bar openly discussing the affair with everyone. I was devastated because this was entirely out of character for Jerry. My friend mentioned that he seemed intoxicated and not like his usual self, which greatly worried me because Jerry rarely ever drinks, typically having only 2 or 3 drinks in a year. I was extremely anxious and began calling and texting him repeatedly, but he remained unresponsive. I returned home and decided to wait for Jerry to come back. A little after 9:00 p.m., a friend of his dropped him off in our driveway. As soon as he entered the house, I embraced him tightly. Initially, he didn't respond, but eventually he started hugging me back and we began talking. I could smell alcohol on him, and he was in tears, questioning, "How could you do this to me?" I expressed my profound regret and explained that it had been a colossal mistake, emphasizing that it had occurred almost 30 years ago. He claimed that our life had been constructed upon a falsehood. He went on to berate himself, expressing anger at feeling shamed by a loser of a man, selfish idiot who threw away a good woman. I tried to comfort him, but he told me to leave and go back to my parents' house. He emphasized that he didn't want to see me again, even as I cried and begged. I left feeling devastated and heartbroken. I reached out to my parents, and they are letting me stay with them until things settle down. Now, I am faced with the immense pain of possibly losing Jerry. I understand that I made a terrible mistake 29 years ago, and I deeply regret it. I'm struggling with how to proceed and how to make things right with Jerry. I also feel terrible about the way my children have reacted, and I'm unsure if we'll ever be able to mend these broken relationships. I hope someone can offer me advice or support during this challenging time. I sincerely apologize for the long post, but I felt it was necessary to provide all the details. Thank you for reading. Update 1. A lot has happened since I last shared my story. After leaving Jerry's place and moving back in with my parents, I took some time to reflect and process everything that had unfolded. I knew I needed to face my mistakes head on and find a way to make amends. In the days that followed, I reached out to a therapist to work through my feelings of guilt and shame. I realized that understanding my own emotions and behaviors was crucial not just for my own well-being, but also for how I approached healing with Jerry and my family. I also decided to write a heartfelt letter to Jerry apologizing for my past mistakes and expressing my sincere regret. I didn't expect him to forgive me immediately, but I hoped it would at least show him how deeply I was reflecting on my actions. I admitted my faults, expressed my love for him, and explained how much he and our family meant to me. After sending the letter, I gave Jerry space and time to process it. Meanwhile, I worked on rebuilding my relationship with my children. It was a slow process, filled with honest conversations and a lot of listening. I wanted them to know that I was genuinely committed to making things right, and I sought their forgiveness without pressuring them. Jerry eventually reached out to me. He agreed to meet and talk things through. It was an emotional conversation where we both shared our feelings, fears, and hopes for the future. He acknowledged the letter and appreciated the effort I had put into understanding my past mistakes. While he wasn't ready to fully reconcile, he was open to the possibility of working things out. As for my children, our relationships have started to heal. It's a process, but they see that I'm making a sincere effort to be a better person and parent. We're rebuilding trust, one step at a time. I'm still living with my parents for now, but I'm hopeful about the future. There's a lot of work ahead, and I'm committed to making the necessary changes in my life. I've learned that healing and forgiveness take time, but they're possible if we are willing to put in the effort. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice. Your kindness has been a guiding light through this challenging time. Update 2. Since the last update, my journey has continued to evolve. I've been actively attending therapy, which has been instrumental in understanding my past actions and working towards personal growth. The sessions have given me valuable insights into my behavior and helped me develop strategies to manage my emotions better. In terms of my relationship with Jerry, we've started a tentative process of rebuilding trust. We're seeing a mediator to facilitate our conversations and address unresolved issues. It's been a challenging but productive process, And while we're not back to where we were, there's a sense of progress. My relationship with my children is gradually improving. We've started spending more quality time together, and I'm focusing on being present and attentive to their needs. They've been receptive to my efforts, and we're slowly reconnecting. I've also been exploring new interests and hobbies as a way to channel my energy positively and build a new sense of identity. It's been a rewarding experience, giving me a renewed sense of purpose and direction. Overall, while there is still a long road ahead, I'm optimistic about the future. I'm committed to continuing my journey of self-improvement and making amends where possible. Thanks for tuning in to today's Reddit story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss out on more amazing stories. See you next time.